It's a nice day for an odd wedding. Well, not necessarily odd weddings. We have a mix of interesting wedding customs, traditions, superstitions, and what other countries do. From the Birmingham Age-Herald, June 1908, brings us the story from the New York World. Modern girls, well, those that were modern in 1908, are seemingly a superstitious lot when it comes to their nuptials. They will not listen to their banns, aka their upcoming wedding announcements, being read in church. If they do hear them, the children of the marriage will be born not speaking and not hearing. Losing your engagement ring? The worst thing ever. An equivalent to a sign from God. Good night, what does it mean? It means the maid cannot marry the man who gave her the ring. Hence why women would never remove their engagement or wedding rings. Removal of the engagement ring, the death of either the girl or the guy. Removal of the wedding ring, the death of the husband. Jeez. Let's go international, shall we? South America. Sorry. The newspaper doesn't get any more specific than the whole of South America. Anyway, apparently 13 marriageable girls meet once a month in a room and pull from each other's head of hair as many hairs as the one getting the hair pulled has lived her life in this world. According to the newspaper, this action promotes backward young men to propose. Is that what they want? They want backward young men? There's also another way of getting someone to propose to you. The young lady will go to a cemetery in the middle of the night and find a stone. Said stone gets placed under her bed pillow. And just like that, do. Jewish customs are for the bride and groom to break the glasses they drink from at the wedding and then crush the glass under their feet. Among Bohemians, the tradition is to break the water pitcher at the wedding breakfast. How many fragments are picked up denotes how many happy years of married life will occur. More international. Calumet News, 1911. Brings us some more non-U.S. wedding customs, some incredibly ancient ones. From the ancient Greeks, if a crow was seen at any time during the wedding meal, which apparently was always done out in the open, outside, I guess, divorce would result. Unless all of the women present stood up and shouted all together, "Go away, crow!" Now, I can't do this. I would be the one woman waggling my fingers at it and trying to entice it to be my best friend with something shiny. Anyway, crow discrimination aside, the white dove, which was considered the opposite, the antithesis of the crow, came to be known as the wedding bird. Interesting. But I'm a weirdo. Crows and ravens are much more fascinating to me. In Thuringia, which I had to look up, it's one of the 16 states of Germany. Anyway, Thuringia, way back in the day, an almond or some kind of other available nut had to be put into the wedding meal soup. Whomever found the nut would marry within the year. That's like finding the plastic baby in your slice of Mardi Gras king cake. Well, maybe not quite like that, but you get my drift. Now, I'm not sure what country this is from. Apparently it's shared by many countries, but like the crow or raven, no widow or widower was allowed at the bridal party unless there was also an old spinster maid or bachelor present. The never married ones being there would counteract the alleged bad juju of the widow people being there, because the widow people kind of represented death. Whoa. Apparently in England and in America, a bride who happened to eat pickles at her bridal meal would be doomed to unrequited love. Why the hate on pickles? Pickles, crows, all the things I like. So an old belief, again, this was written in 1911, so very old belief, way before 1911, at the wedding meal, all of the food must be passed to the right. Apparently, this may have started from Henry of Navarre, who gave some advice to his minister Sully, who was finding himself in a love dilemma. Henry told Sully, quote, "If you wish a good wife, turn to the right," end quote. Sully entered the door at the right of the hallway and found a young woman there who had been brought to him by his friend Henry. That's creepy. I mean, all we know is that they did get married. Last from this newspaper was the New England quote, quote, "3 times a bridesmaid, never a bride," end quote. Sorry, New England is made up of several states, but we don't know which one for this particular quote. I do admit that I have heard a variation of this one over the years. And then from Massachusetts, which is part of New England, quote, "If you try on your wedding gown before the ceremony, you will never be happy," end quote. Oh dear. How will I know if that stress eating I've been doing means I need to have the seams let out? Daytona Daily News, December 1915. Northern Africa has devised a really clever way of getting the wedding paid for. When the guests enter, a man at the door receives the money they give and writes it down in a book. If any of those guests in turn hosts a wedding, they will receive in turn the amount of money they had paid as guests. The guests pay for the wedding, and each guest has already received as much as he gives or will receive that amount later on. I like that. Evening Bulletin, August 1902, would tell of a Scottish penny wedding, which was similar in nature, where invited guests would contribute a shilling, or maybe even a half-crown, and out of this pool of money, the wedding feast would be paid. Germany had a paid wedding, where a bride would sit with some sort of basin, bowl, or box in front of her, and each guest would come before her and put in a jewel, a silver spoon, or some money. In some parts of Germany, the expenses of the marriage feast would be met by each guest paying for their food and or drink. The prices could be pretty high. Think when you go to a concert, ball game, the inflated food and beverage prices. Anyway, those inflated prices ensured the new couple that they could not only pay for the feast, but also get a nice start off on their new life together. You get yourself 300 thirsty and hungry guests? Hello, Starter Mansion. Durham Recorder, April 1910. A man named Rockford King wrote a story that was picked up by many a newspaper. Basically, he was in his study when a couple came in and asked him to marry them. Mr. King, not happy with this last-minute crap, hear, Mr. King, well, he hesitated. But they were both of age. There seemed to be nothing outwardly objectionable about either of them. Mr. King invited them to come in. But as soon as they got settled inside, some footsteps were heard rushing in. The would-be groom grew pale. The would-be bride told Mr. King impatiently to go on. 2 men burst into the room. One of them looked over at the groom and said, "All right, we've got him," and said to the groom, "You come along with me." Mr. King obviously wanted to know what this intrusion was about. The man said, quote, "He's an escaped convict," end quote. Mr. King looked at the groom and asked if that was correct. The groom said that it was. The 2 men were prison officials. The bride-to-be went up to the 2 men and begged them to allow for the marriage before they took the man back to prison. After conferring, the prison officials allowed it, claiming that the bride-to-be was the one throwing her life away on a convict, and they had him in custody, so sure, go for it. Mr. King, again hesitant, but what the heck? He married them. She gave Mr. King a 20, threw her arms around her new husband's neck. Quote, "It'll be all right now, dearie. We've married. I can now tell the whole story. I would have done it before, only you wouldn't let me. It won't be long now, I assure you. I won't say goodbye, but only adieu," end quote. She kissed him. He went away with the prison officials. Mr. King handed her the marriage certificate and asked her for an explanation. She said, quote, "Not yet. Thank you ever so much. You don't know how far you have been instrumental in untying a knot by tying one. Couldn't you date the certificate back a year?" End quote. Mr. King said no, and she was okay with it, although she would intimate it would have made things a little easier. And she would tell Mr. King that he would hear from them again someday. 6 months pass, nothing. But then a man came to the house and called on Mr. King. Quote, "You don't remember me," the man said. "I confess I do not," Mr. King replied. Quote, "That's not remarkable. The last and only time I saw you, I was an escaped convict in borrowed, or rather stolen, clothes. You married me before I was returned to the penitentiary," end quote. Quote, "And may I ask how you have secured your freedom?" End quote. Quote, "By a pardon from the governor. You see, it was a case of conviction under a misunderstanding." Mr. King said to him, "Please be seated and make your explanation." The man continued, quote, "The matter which has puzzled you is very simple when you get the facts. I courted my wife clandestinely, she being engaged at the time to her father's partner in business. I persuaded her to elope with me. The night we were to make the elopement, I went to her house and met her at a rear door. At the moment our egress was cut off. She admitted me to the house and closed the door. To escape detection, we went upstairs and into a bedroom. We heard someone coming, and the girl told me to go into an adjoining room. Her father came into the room I had entered, and, supposing me to be a burglar, called the police. I must either be content to confess myself a thief, or the girl's reputation would be ruined. I chose the former course. Since my marriage, my wife has confessed the whole story to her father, and I have been pardoned both by him and the governor." End quote. After telling his story to Mr. King, he gave Mr. King a check for $3,000 from him and his wife for Mr. King to go on a European trip. Speaking of Europe, Holbrook, August 1902. Switzerland brides will not let anyone kiss the brides on the lips on their wedding day, not even the bride's parents. Apparently, somewhere, not sure where, the cook will pour hot water on the threshold after the bridal couple have passed to keep it warm for a future bride. What's a good day to get married? In Scotland, it's December 31st, so that the young couple can leave the old behind and start the new year with their new life. My grandparents did this, though I'm not sure for the same reason, and they were most definitely not Scottish. Italians do not want wedding gifts that are in any way sharp or pointy. If you decide to gift a beautiful, nice kitchen knife set, you have just literally severed your friendship with the married pair. And this one I do know. I don't know where it originated, was that right after the ceremony, the bride will toss her bouquet among her single friends. The one catching it will be the next bride. Now, the weddings I've attended, this happens well after the ceremony and not using the original bridal bouquet, so not sure if that takes the magic out of it or what. Now we're going to end on this tale. Colfax Gazette, June 1907. In August, a few months from when this story was published, in Tate Springs, Tennessee, we're going to have a wedding. Not just any wedding. Before we get into the wedding itself, let's talk about the backstory of the couple getting hitched. We have John Bundren and Rose McGuire. Back in the 1820s, the two lived on adjoining farms, and not surprising, the two fell in love. Storybook tale, and sadly predictable, right? Well, wait. John and Rose, being in love, started to talk about getting married. But, oh dear, one set of parents wasn't having it in the most extreme way possible. Rose's parents would actually take the huge step of not only disallowing the marriage from happening, but return to their old home in England in 1827 with Rose in tow. John, we don't know how he was feeling, but what he did was pack up his things. And no, he didn't go to England. What he did was head out to California during the gold rush of the 1840s and 50s and struck it rich. Once good to go, he headed back to his home state of Tennessee and not only bought his old family homestead, he bought Rose's family's old homestead next door. Did he and Rose keep in touch? No. John continued to grow his wealth and also bought a lot of property in California where he actually mostly lived. But last year, 1906, John decided to plan a reunion of sorts. He rustled up some invites to have an old boys and girls reunion at the two old homesteads in Tennessee. Those invites out to particular men and women over 90 to come and enjoy the beauty of this place and the most interesting reunion ever. So let's back up the truck a little on Rose. The only thing known is that Rose, of course, had been taken back to England some 75 years ago, and who had lost sight of John until 6 months ago, when she read in her home paper about this old folks reunion. She got in touch with John, and blow my nose, they fell in love all over again. He's 101, and she's 100. John has continued to be very wealthy and is paying the expenses of anyone over 90 who will attend the reunion, and the couple will be married on August 26th, which I'm assuming is happening during the reunion. So I loved the story. Yes, I said loved, past tense. What I just read to you was my synopsis of this news story, which appeared in a lot of newspapers. But then, after I wrote up that summary, I decided to look up to see if the couple actually were able to get married. Please don't let anything happen to either of them beforehand, as they were so far up in years. Please let the wedding go through, etc. And you know what I found out? That whole story was a hoax. The original story was printed in a lot of newspapers all over the country and internationally in April 1907. People like me were drawn to it, loving it, thinking it was nice to finally read a story that didn't make you want to cry or scream. But in early August 1907, there was a shakedown, and the truth will out. The lying liar who lied? John B. Bundren, Jr. of St. Louis. Who was this John Bundren? An obscure government clerk in a medical supply depot. No longer obscure because he told the tallest of tall tales and had everyone believing it. And Bundren Jr. was adding fuel to the flames as the months had passed from the original story, telling people that he was going to be the best man for his great uncle's marriage. When people wanted to talk to old John themselves, young John would tell them that old John had gone over to England to bring his would-be bride back to the U.S. Photographs? Oh dear. Old John forgot to get pictures taken before he went to England. The media was getting ticked. Yes, even in 1907. Oh look, hey, young John found that old John did get some pictures. And according to the San Antonio Light, August 4th, 1907, quote, "From the picture, old Mr. Bundren looks like a cross between Santa Claus, the Count of Monte Cristo, Robinson Crusoe, and the stuffing of a hair mattress," end quote. But hey, the media got a picture, but now they wanted a pic of Rose. Young John allegedly wrote Miss Rose, and she allegedly sent a picture which, according to the Light, quote, "It looks suspiciously like a picture of Mary Baker Eddy taken some 20 years ago, and some people found fault with it on that score, and because the lady looked to be 50 or 60 instead of 100, end quote. I had to look this up. Mary Baker Eddy was an American religious leader who had actually founded the Church of Christ Scientist. Well, young John would say that Miss Rose said it was her, and he wasn't going to doubt the word of a lady. And young John continued to add and make the story bigger and bigger. That old John had written his not so great nephew, that young John needed to select the most beautiful lady in the U.S. to be a bridesmaid. Young women sent in their pictures. The winner would be a bridesmaid. Second and third place would be given transportation and hotel costs for the reunion. Young John would tell the press that over 300 old people would be coming to the reunion, and that Mark Twain, Mark Twain, was coming to accompany old John and to give the bride away. A reporter, Richard, curious about all of the hullabaloo, went to St. Louis. He went to the address where the pretty bridesmaid-to-be pictures were to be sent. No response when the door was knocked upon. Richard looked in the directory and found a John B. Bungrew, not Bundren, who was a clerk in the Army Supply Depot. Address given. He went there and was brought over to the work desk of young John. Young John, startled but apparently laid on a thick Tennessee accent, said that he was the young John that had sent out the newspaper information, but there was nothing to add. The reporter called him out. Young John would not relent, saying it was true, but if the reporter wanted to talk more, they could meet after young John's job ended for the day. So they met later. Richard the reporter brought out the picture of old John and said that the photographer of that picture had been located, and the photographer told the reporter about how young John made himself look old, but forgot to put in some crow's feet, etc. Young John, proud to just happen to resemble his relative. But then the reporter and young John bantered about young John's age, originally young John saying he was 44. Richard the reporter negotiated him down to a more truthful 32. Still keeping with the story, though. But eventually, the truth did come out later. Young John would admit that he had wanted to publish a book on longevity. The call for old people to attend a reunion was for that purpose. He had sent out a list of questions for the people wanting to come to the reunion to complete, and pictures from those who asked for transportation. All of that information, those pictures, were for his book. The beauty contest? Not related to this book. But young John did think about putting out another book about the beautiful girls of the U.S. So if the truth hadn't come out, how was young John going to end this saga? He would say that he had planned to keep the non-existent old John and Rose in England until late July. Then Rose would come to an accident of sorts, either very hurt or dying, and old John, heartbroken, no wedding. Young John would say he didn't know if he was going to have old John die of grief on her grave or take his own life. Well, at least we didn't have to learn of that. Wow. Just wow. You upset? Now you know how I felt. And many, 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 many thousands of readers. But next time, we're back to true crime. And this episode will be a little bit difficult. See you.